Hey, this is Sober Cannibal, and today we're going to be talking about making your own Mythic Plus groups in World of Warcraft. Now, the hardest thing about Mythic Plus you'll find immediately is that it's tough to get invited to groups. If you go into guides or streams, they'll inevitably tell you, just make your own group, but it's not as easy as that, particularly if you struggle with anxiety, or are a noob, or are on tight time constraints. So this is going to be a detailed guide on how to start your own groups, including all the communication necessary, as well as detailed instructions on things like how to form and start your own key. This guide is made for the War Within, however it's currently pre-patched, so forgive me for the Dragonflight dungeons I'm using for demonstration. We'll stick to general concepts that are always applicable. All the systems we'll be using are up to date for the War Within. Now I want to say early that I love pugging. It's the primary way I engage with Mythic Plus, and I love helping other people get in and start enjoying dungeons, but I do need to issue a warning about pugging. You're going to be dealing with the whole spectrum of humanity that plays World of Warcraft. I've met some amazing people in this game, but I've also run into some bad ones. Sometimes poorly adjusted people will even try to hurt your feelings over this game. You don't need to respect those people or give them any power over you. Don't listen to their drivel. However, I want to reassure you that I think the toxicity in the pug scene is blown out of proportion. Most of the people I meet are just friendly, awkward World of Warcraft players, just like you. We're going to be pugging today on my Feral Druid because it's a good middle-of-the-road character. It's got a fine Raider IO score, it's got not quite maximum item level, and it's a good candidate to lead a group because it's hard to get invited otherwise. It's always been a bit of a meme how difficult it is to get invited on Feral Druid. And we're going to be doing a +9 Ruby life pools today because +9s are a difficult key to pug. People tend to do +8s for aspects crests or +10s for portals, and 9s are kind of this wasteland of depleted 10s. So we're going to try to work our way out of the +9 hellhole today. Alright, part 1, listing your group. First, let's quickly make sure you have yourself ready. Do you have your consumables? Are your talents right? Have you set the dungeon difficulty to Mythic by right-clicking your portrait? These are easy to forget as things get started. Now, to list your group, open up the group finder, click Dungeons and Raids, Pre-made Group, Dungeons, Start a Group. Now my advice is to leave everything in the group listing exactly as it is. Ensure the dungeon name is correct and the difficulty is set to Mythic Plus. I always leave the listing name as just the dungeon difficulty, here +9. Don't put my key, everyone knows it's your key. Don't put chill run, it tends to scare off the good players. Don't put big dick, have some dignity. Don't add details, don't add any minimum item level either. You can't set it higher than your own, so it only serves to show everybody how bad your gear is. As for goals, that part's a little bit worth talking about. One of the main challenging points of WoW socially is people having different goals and expectations, and this goes for everywhere from pugging to guild management. Some people only care about finishing a key so they get their loot and vault slot and don't care about how long it takes. Some people, particularly in +10s for portals, only care about timing the key. These are both reasonable ways to play, but they can sometimes lead to friction. One group doesn't like their key being abandoned, one doesn't like being trapped in a disastrous run. Ideally, this is something to communicate about in advance, and the goal tab in theory makes this easier. However, in practice, I find completion tends to scare off the good players who don't want to get stuck in an all-nighter, and in time attracts players who are going to quit at the first sign of trouble. So all that to say, I recommend just leaving the goal as standard. Now remember that this is for lower level 2 to 10 dungeons, which means we only need to worry about some very basic concepts when making our group. I'll take any tank, any healer, at least one battle res, which comes from Death Knights, Druids, Paladins, and Warlocks, and a Bloodlust effect, which comes from Mages, Shamans, Hunters, and Evokers. Ideally, I want a mix of melee and range, but sometimes this just doesn't pan out, and it's not a big deal. At our level, we don't need to worry about things like the tier list meta, that's for things like surviving one-shots and high keys. All specs are viable for us. We can consider damage profiles, trying to get a mix of single target and AoE if you know what does what, but if you're unfamiliar with, say, a pumper survival hunter who signs up, just invite them and see what happens. No need to make this too difficult. Any tank, any healer, any lust, any B-res. It can take a while for people to sign up, particularly that first person. Oftentimes people won't sign up for groups of 1 DPS, so if you do get someone that meets one of your criteria, try to take them, even if their score is a little low. Conversely, I also try to leave a DPS spot open till the end so that if a tank has a friend, they can sign up. This also prevents you from getting stuck needing, for example, a tank with a battle res to meet all of your criteria. Now, sometimes people ask, should I decline people? And that's a good question. There's some controversy in the community about that. I personally would prefer to get declined than to sit in queue for a group that's never going to invite me anyway, so that I can move on and apply for different groups. Some people, it hurts their feelings to get declined, so for that reason I usually don't decline people, even though I wish they would do it to me. Here we have our first applicant, and it's a well-geared, well-ranked tank from a top 20 guild. Not what I was expecting, but this is an easy yes. A strong tank is a huge boon because they have the greatest degree of control over the success of the key, and now that we have one, our group will fill up much faster. Now I'm going to do the part that's the hardest for some people, be social. I usually say hey yo, which seems to be the universal greeting in NA Mythic Plus, after the first person joins, and hey all once the party is full. Then I usually don't say another word until the end of the key. It's literally that easy. At the end, a GGTY or a thanks all is nice. Now we have a couple more applicants here. Our first is the Death Knight, 530 item level, which is great, 645 rating, which is low. So we don't have any particular reason to invite this Death Knight. We already have a battle res. We already have one melee DPS. So we're happy to wait and see who else comes along. As for this rogue, lower rating, much lower item level. This is a case where I'm never going to invite this person. I could decline them, but I risk hurting their feelings. So instead, I'm going to leave them. Now this is interesting. A holy paladin and 2 mages. The mages are low and lower gear and score, but the paladin looks strong. This isn't optimal in any way, but it meets our requirements of having a tank, any healer, any bloodlust, and a battle res, so I'm taking them. We have the mighty Snap XD, what's the worst that could happen? And besides, I don't want to keep him waiting. Our group is complete. Now it's time to head to the dungeon entrance and get people summoned. Once everybody is in the dungeon, I usually give them about 10 or 15 seconds to use their consumables, and then I use this pull-out panel on the left. The first thing I'm going to do is use the check mark button. This is going to issue a ready check to the group. While they're ready checking, I'm going to move over to this glowing pedestal. This is where you put your keystone. So you're going to right click the pedestal, open up your bags, and insert your keystone into the pedestal, but don't hit activate yet. Once everybody is ready, I'm going to go back to the left pull-out panel and hit the clock button. This is going to issue a 10-second countdown. We do this countdown because some classes like to use their major cooldowns and they get reset at the beginning of the dungeon. This can make the first pull easier for you, so it is beneficial to do. It's not worth remembering every class that needs this reset at the beginning, so just go ahead and do the 10-second countdown for everybody. Alright, you're doing it. You're in a strong group running up your key. From this point, there's no serious group leading you need to do. Actually, most of the responsibility is on the tank. Just do big dam and mob control like you ordinarily would, and time this key. Since we've met our goals, I'm going to end the guide here, but in the companion video to follow, we'll see the exciting conclusion to this dungeon, as well as start several more example groups, including some on a rattier character, and get into some slightly more advanced communication. I hope this helped in familiarizing you with the tools for group creation and reassures you that actually very little is required as far as socializing or communication goes. Good luck out there. I hope to see you in the streets of LFG. Thank you for watching this far. This is obviously my first video, but I really wanted to share what I've been doing because I love pugging and getting to meet and play with new people, but I know it's a struggle for many to get started. If you made a group like this, I'd love to hear about it, as well as any tips or pointers you'd like to add. Thanks. Have a good night.